Hey, brother. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Pleasure being here.
I'm really honored that you're here today. You're such a successful entrepreneur. You've built you have a long career journey, and we don't really need to get into that right now because I think there's a lot of other great topics we're going to get into. You just finished your Series D $100 million round for almost like a tech healthcare startup in the orthodontic space. And again, if people really want to learn more about that, they can Google you. But what I want to talk about today is really the context of what that means to be an entrepreneur at that stage, dealing with all of the burdens, responsibilities, challenges, opportunities, while also balancing family and life. And comes down to my first question, which always is, what does rich mean to you?
That's a great question, Ash. And as I think about this here, I'm an engineer by training. So you know what a differential equation is, right? Multivariate, dependent on time, and the more I kind of think about life, success, rich, and what that means, I think it really is dependent on time. And it's an equation that is really defined by you, really, right? And, not to get so philosophical so early on, but I think life a lot is about sort of like where you are and what you want and being happy with where you are while also pursuing what you want. But this whole equation, this delta between where you are and what you want is defined by you. So ultimately in the end, I think we are all capable of being rich. Just depends on what you define, I remember when you mentioned we raised 102 million actually. And when we first started this company, I was in front of these angel investors trying to raise 50,000. And I thought with 50,000, we're going to be rich. We're going to rule the world. And then 50,000 became 500,000, became 50 million, became 100 million. And it really is, people talk about that journey. It really is about enjoying that journey, because if you try to get to that end destination or that end point of the equation, it's not about that. I don't know if I made sense. I got really deep fast there.
Yeah. You've had a really deep journey as an entrepreneur. You tell me about your process in what you've learned and some of the things perhaps you were surprised about in the journey that blindsided you.
Well, I grew up an immigrant, boy in the hood story. Always a little bit of an outsider, right? I was the only Asian kid in a Hispanic neighborhood, and then moved out of there. Then I was the only Asian kid in a Caucasian neighborhood. Now I'm in an Asian neighborhood, but I'm like the only Asian kid that thinks the way I do in my neighborhood. So, but I think early on, a lot of entrepreneurs start with this chip on their shoulder, trying to prove something. And that mama mentality, may work well to a certain point, but after that, you have nothing left to prove.
It catches up to you.
It catches up to you. It really does, and so, I'd say for me, I kind of, up until a few years ago, I kind of realized I have nothing left to prove. It's really, the why has to be, within yourself, and you can't do entrepreneurship or that thing, whatever it is, to climb that mountain for anything external. It has to be an internal drive. Right? Like this podcast, I asked you, why do you do this? But I asked it rhetorically because I knew coming in that this was just for you.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of you, actually. I was like, I think I told you, I'm so proud of you that you do this. Because it's not for any monetary value.
Yeah.
And it's not for any brand you're trying to build. It's for you. Right? And to me, that's rich.
Thanks. one of the things that I learned in my experience in my journey was, and it's spot on to what you're saying, is that we end up as high performers, high doers, and people who are ambitious.
Yeah.
We end up not really understanding intention. And you go in and you have this like almost innocent, youthful, blind drive, which is wonderful. And I think that's a good place to start, like a little bull in a china shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't understand intention.
You're getting me fired up right now already.
Let's do it, baby. Here we go.
So I'm a huge Kobe fan. I'm a huge Laker fan. So I talk about Mamba mentality, right?
Yep.
And building the systems and building the habits that kind of help you climb that mountain, get to where you are. I think you even told me once, you're like, hey, build some habits, right?
Yes.
But it all starts with the identity, right? And, you have to, I have to, slow down now and stop and go, okay, who am I? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And then the intention leads from there. There's this quote, that really inspires me is, you want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? And so many of us are like response bots to our phones, to marketing, to, I call it hustle porn, this glorified entrepreneur type thing that,
porn.
Mama mentality, all love to Kobe and all, but
go.
It's like, is that really the way? Is that really what you want? To what ends?
It's unsustainable.
It's unsustainable, and really, to what end? Are you willing to die for it? If you are, great, but if you're not, that's fine too, right? Because you can only, I guess you can add an infinite amount of zeros to your life, but to your bank account, but like, it's, if that's the only way you're going to define success, actually, if you don't even stop to even ask yourself, what are the parts of this equation of what richness is, then why even start? Then you're just living someone else's equation.
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly the point, right? Is that I think most people go after this chase for years and years and years, ignorantly chasing some dream they think that they want. Yeah. And then they get it, and they're like, wow, that's really unfulfilling. Okay. I don't have the relationships I want. I don't have the richness I want. Go.
Are you a basketball fan?
Not really.
Not really. Okay. Well, maybe for some of maybe for some of the people listening here, like Jerry West.
Yeah, of course.
One of the most successful basketball players out there. The logo of the NBA is, Jerry West. He suffers from depression. He hates losing more than he loves winning, right? You can look at it and glorify it. That's great, but like, do you want to be that? Mm-hmm. To what end? We talked earlier before we went live here, but my grandma, she just passed away last week, bless her heart. But at 96 years old, I reflected upon her life a lot. And, immigrant story, again, grew up in Vietnam with nothing. And she essentially died with, almost nothing, but she lived a full life and she was happy. Didn't need much. Mm-hmm. Didn't live anybody else's life, lived life the way she wanted to. Overcame oppression, overcame communism, fled Vietnam, came to America, overcame racism, all these things. And she died on this cot that she kind of just slept in, for 60 years and, couldn't have asked for more. Didn't need a Benz, didn't need a BMW, didn't need a Rolex, didn't need a 2-story house. She lived in my sister's house, in a little corner of the house. Perfectly fine. And I'd say she's richer than most people that I know.
One of the things that I learned through my journey is asking why. And I think that that's the premise of this entire podcast, is the premise why I want to have these conversations with people is for other people who are listening to learn from that process, learn from that experience from people like you who have perhaps gone down a journey not asking why long enough to maybe get hurt, maybe get disappointed, maybe get discouraged, maybe feel, codependence.
Yeah.
All these things that we end up chasing somebody else's dream. And I think that the real gift is learning those triggers, learning those blind spots in yourself, and figuring out how do we retake control of those things to drive the results you really want.
You know, it's so interesting because you're right. We're so busy chasing, people at the top and people at the bottom of the pyramid. We're all busy chasing, and few of us ever stop to ask why. But interestingly enough, is what I've come to learn is the people who actually define why and create the constructs, so to speak, for the world are the people who are the most successful.
Totally.
Right? The people who define, why. Like, what does success mean? What does truth mean? What does government mean? What does basketball mean? What does, they set the constructs, they define the rules. And they're the ones that actually end up being most successful. But once they find out that why is all defined by you, they're actually, once they get there, they're like, well, I don't need all this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm getting kind of theoretical here.
No, you're totally right, because
right.
It's almost like this means to an end.
Yeah.
You ask the right questions, you'll get what you want.
Yeah.
And people go into it mostly blinded.
To go back to the rich equation. I love how you set this podcast up.
Thanks.
And I do think that the equation is defined by you. You can set your own equation. It's not Absolutely. A equation, it's your equation. And once you realize it's your equation, is so freeing, because you find out the equation doesn't matter.
Amen,
because
man.
you have the recipe now, right?
You have all the tools that you need to be happy right now.
Yes.
Everybody does.
Yes.
No amount of income, no amount of money, no amount of friends is going to make you happy.
And that goes back to the intent, waking up with the intent to be happy. I mean, it's work. Being miserable is easy. Plenty of those people. Being happy takes work, right? Being grateful takes work. Talk about being response bots, right? Living someone else's why, living someone else's constructs. You and I are around the same age, so the age of cell phones just, came up, while we were growing up. And I didn't realize until like 2-3 years ago that the phones are controlling me.
Mm-hmm.
And I started kind of thinking about the first 5 things that I do when I wake up, right? And it's usually some version of grab my phone.
We talked about this.
Click the phone, something like that. And I've for the last year or so, I've tried to not have the phone be within the first 5 things I do, except for turn off the alarm, but right. My life has been so much more freeing. And, going back to intent, like, I am now setting the intent for my day, and I'm now being the thermostat for my day instead of the thermometer to my day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you, when do you check your email? How soon do you check your email?
So I'll tell you, I was a robot for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was completely victimized
Mm-hmm.
to the unawareness of the program. And I actually now, and I never really learned this growing up, but I think being surrounded in the communities we are, like seeing other people have healthy routine, have healthy structures, I started putting this into my life. So I have a really rigid morning routine, but I probably don't touch my phone. Well, I shouldn't say that. I touch my phone, but I don't really look at email and get lost in email until maybe 8:30.
And what time do you wake up?
Anywhere between 5 and 6.
Okay. So you got 3 hours to yourself.
3 hours.
And that routine, the system you set up for yourself, I'm sure that was intentional.
It has to be intentional, because I lived for almost 3 decades without having intention.
Mm-hmm. And could you, I'm asking you questions on your own podcast.
Do it.
But I'd love to learn from you, man. Like, those 3 hours, right? How has that impacted your life?
It's changed everything, right? Because I think I was just having this another conversation with somebody else, is that we end up having the day take us rather than us take the day.
Mm-hmm.
And without the intention and the control, it's really easy just to pick up the phone and get lost. Yeah. And then by the end of the day, it's 4 or 5 o'clock. you're exhausted, you're tired, you're stressed, you're completely dependent on, you're reactionary.
Yeah.
Whereas now having sort of an offensive strategy, you're able to plan, you're able to organize, you're able to cut out. I think one of the things somebody told me, which I thought was, learn how to say no.
Yeah.
Like learn what not to do before you learn what to do.
That's
and
true.
I think you don't really get that when you're young. You just do a lot of like stupid shit and you make a lot of mistakes and you spend a lot of time doing things that don't add value, which is, there's a place for that too. But once you get good at stuff and you get smarter, you actually be more effective when you just know what to say yes to and say no to 98% of the rest of the stuff.
So, I'm going to ask you, what does a rich day feel like to you?
For me?
Yeah.
Well, I'll answer the question in the way that I feel, because that's what you asked. To me, it really feels like I have a grounded, sustainable energy. I don't have highs and lows. I don't have, I don't have stress and like boredom, and I don't have significant contrasts. I'm able to contain and sustain my energy throughout the day. And also I think a rich day to me is also where I'm not I'm not triggered all day. So I've created a space in the morning where I fill my cup, or I whatever people want to call it. I've controlled the thoughts between my ears so that when I go through the day, I'm not incredibly triggered. Now, it doesn't always happen, right? Like I'll miss a routine and things happen, or I do a routine and things still happen. And so there's always a journey, but like I've learned that I was in a program for years and years and years where I was just completely reacting to everything, and I was triggering to people. I was being triggered. I was stressed out all the time. I was hyper, and part of it, like, it makes people successful in this material world, and people think that there's some value there that we apply to, and so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you're being rewarded for that almost. But I think it's a fast way to end up in the grave.
Yeah.
How about you? Same question or different question?
A rich day to me in the end is when I go to sleep feeling fulfilled, and not to be so generic here, right?
Yeah.
But feeling like I've taken, from the day, right? Instead of just getting through it. And it's funny, right? Because after all these things, and maybe for the listeners here, I am type A still as it comes, right? Yeah. So I got like 2-3 engineering degrees, DDS, dentist, orthodontist, master's in craniofacial biology, 3 startups I've done in my life, and my last one here raised 180 something million in the last couple of years. So check. Ferraris, Lamborghinis early on in life, all that stuff that doesn't matter. But nowadays, like I really have a 3 checkoff list, right? It has nothing to do with work, but literally, and I'll show it to you on my little to-do list, once we're done here at Ash. If I can do 3 things, it's 5 minutes of gratitude, 30 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes of meditation.
And if you can do that,
if I can do that before the day ends, my day is pretty good, right? And the more I do this exploration of life and figure out what this equation is, the more I find out that like the things that make me feel rich, like really, if no one's around watching and I'm by myself, the things that make me feel rich are the things that money can't buy, that you pretty much already have within your grasp, that if you just had some intent every single day to say hi to your neighbor, hug your wife, kiss your kids, put the phone away while you're eating breakfast, that's all it is.
What's in your gratitude rampage?
So again, when I first started my gratitude list, every day. It was like, I'm so grateful that I have this house. Or, I'm so grateful that I can pay for this thing and whatever, right? Drive this thing. But now, actually, as of my last entry, I think it was literally, I was grateful for my kids and their innocence and laughter. I was grateful for my wife's support in me discovering what rich is. And I wrote down, I'm grateful that I can breathe. Have you ever just sat there and just enjoyed breathing?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's great. I know it sounds crazy.
Intentionally aware about the breath.
Yes.
And the oxygen going in your lungs and the pressure. And yeah, it's amazing.
And it's free. And so, look, I live in Huntington Beach. I live, pretty close to the water. And up until, I don't know, a couple of months ago, I actually never enjoyed it. I worked so hard to get there, and I actually never enjoyed it.
Never enjoyed, meaning never enjoyed like the lifestyle you created for yourself in the space.
Yeah, because I was trying to get to the next thing.
Sure.
Right, and spending all this money on all these things when, like, a parking pass was a 1-year annual pass at Huntington Beach is like $120 or something like that. And now I actually try to enjoy it. Take a walk on the beach and breathe, and it's great.
That's amazing. You and I were talking a few weeks ago, and I don't want to get so
actually, let me rephrase that. It's rich.
Huh?
It's rich.
It's rich.
It's rich.
We were talking a few weeks ago about some stuff you were working through on the business side, and I think that I want to talk about it because I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through this at different places in their life where, they either feel lost or they feel out of control or they feel maybe that, because we're all control freaks. That's not a surprise, but we can't control everything. And there are a lot of things that happen to us that we feel like are happening to us.
Yeah.
But perhaps they're happening for us for some spiritual reason. Tell me a little bit about, and you don't have to go into detail, but like tell me a little bit about what showed up for you and then how you worked through it and some of the lessons you learned in that experience.
Over the past
you were just last few months.
Yeah. Well,
this big round was really important for you.
So, all of us went through the COVID thing. So, that was tough. But yeah, raising the round, right?
Yeah.
We raised 102 million. You guys can look it up, some pretty big firms. I probably have more zeros to my name right now than ever, as far as valuation goes. And as I was raising the round, it probably took like 10 years off my life, but I kept, I was going through the whole like, once I get there, I'll be happy. Once I get there, I'll be happy. And then the dust settles. And first it's the huge dopamine hit of like
getting it,
of like, climbing that mountain.
Right.
And then the dust settles, and then you kind of go, all right, now what's the next thing? Right. And then you start chasing the next thing, which is like the IPO, and then all the pressure that happens. And then you realize a lot of us entrepreneurs, we go through this, I don't know, ebb and flow of like pumping that bubble, and it pops, and then you kind of get the high, and then you hit the next thing. And that's why I keep thinking about when every entrepreneur, when they first started the business, and it was just like that innocence of like, I just want to get this thing out there in the world, and you kind of revisit and you remember like why you started, right? Going back to that intent again, right? Yeah, it at some point, if you stop thinking about the process and start focusing on just the outcomes, I think that is kind of the beginning of the end. Not to be so, dark, but to keep the innocence of it. Like you have to keep looking,
the playfulness
up. You have to know that every step is just the same as every step before that. And I guess talking to entrepreneurs, out there, the ones who have climbed the mountain, far enough, there's always some point when you look back and you look down and you kind of get worried. When I think, you just got to keep looking up, right? Because Yeah, I mean, what's the worst that happens? You just start where you just end up where you started.
One of the things I really admire about you is also, I mean, you wear this role really well as a leader of a thriving entrepreneurial company with innovation and technology at its core, in a very blue ocean type of category too that you're almost creating, right?
Yeah.
We talk about blue ocean a lot. But you do it in a way that like really draws great people towards you, and like you have this amazing culture, and you have this bookshelf in your office, or you're handing out books to people that you feel that would inspire them. Like, tell me where that comes from. Do you have to spend intention to do that? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I think while we're all seeking truth, there is no new truth in some ways. And I think books are kind of truth that people have spent hours or a lot of time trying to distill into pages. And so, the tradition of passing on books, I think, is so powerful because it's passing on language and knowledge about a certain thing. And I was fortunate enough to have a mentor of mine, pass this tradition onto me at a very early age. But I don't know. I just found that it's something that's very useful when meeting other like-minded folks to pass these packets of ideas and truth onto each other. Yeah.
What is one of the biggest mistakes you've ever made in your life?
A lot. A lot. But I think the biggest thing is forgetting your why and living your life for someone else or trying to prove something to someone else, right?
Yeah.
This is the boy in the hood talking here.
Yeah.
And in the end, like, you just got to do it for you.
When you work with other entrepreneurs, or perhaps your leaders or team members or what have you, what advice do you find yourself giving to people the most? Like what, or if it's not to them, like what advice would you give to other people that is advice you find yourself giving them most?
You know what I usually do? So, yeah, I've been very fortunate in being around circles of great people, even people who joined this mission here at Embrace. And I think one thing we all have in common is that we're all here to learn or experience something new, regardless if you're an executive for 40 years or you're a new grad out for 4 days, right? And that is a very important core part of our culture, is that we're here for the experience and for the growth. And, the destination, hopefully it will get there. But if you focus too much on the destination, then it becomes a job, a job. So...
One of the things I admire most about you, and we met probably 7 or 8 years ago now. It's been quite a while since we crossed paths, and we both joined a business CEO roundtable group where we had a chair that put us all together, and you had this ability to get really vulnerable. And I think that most entrepreneurs find that we have to put on this face
suit,
and we had this
this
suit
armor,
and this, we have to look like Superman, and we were blessed to be able to be in a group and be around like-minded guys to be able to take that suit off and share what was really going on and how to show up. And I think that's something that I've learned. I know you've learned it. Can you talk a little bit about that and how people can benefit from being in those circles?
So there are components that are important in my definition of rich. And I share some of them with you, right? But, one is knowing thyself, knowing your identity, knowing your intent, knowing why you want to do certain things. 2 is building the habits and the systems that help you move towards that identity or sense of self. And then 3 is surrounding yourself with people that just want nothing but the best for you and share that same energy.
Yeah.
And Ash, you are one of them. And I didn't realize the importance of that last part, right, until more recently, because for a large part of my life, I was putting on that armor, trying to fake that funk, right? I remember it was so stupid. Like, I remember when I was in, I'm getting kind of vulnerable here with everybody. I remember when I was in junior high, and all the kids were making fun of me because I just looked different, talk different, and all those things. Do you know what my dream was at the time? Was to get a pair of Jordans and to get a pair of silver tab wide legs, because wide leg pants were really in at the time. And I saved up, got my Jordans, got my silver tab wide legs, showed them what's up, because I'm the cool kid now, right? And then you get to college, and you get to high school, and then now I gotta get my rice rocket. So I have one of those Honda Civics drop to the floor, with the body kit and the rims, and now that's my cool thing, And then whatever, then becomes the next fancier car, the bigger degree, all these things. But you get to a certain point when you're around these people that have all these things, and you realize like everybody's just as like lost as you, right? And so I'll tell the readers, the listeners here, I remember the first roundtable we had, I sat down next to you. Someone asked a question, I forgot what it was, like, how do you feel today, John, or something like that.
Are you happy?
And I broke down crying. A grown man crying next to you.
First time we met.
And I was 38, something like that, right? But, from there, I started learning these things that sound so simple, but we don't talk about what are you gonna do today, or what do you need to do for this and that. We just talk about, well, so how does that make you feel?
And people think that's a really stupid question.
It's not.
But I think people forget that you're only doing things to make you feel a certain way.
Yes.
If you're chasing money, you're hoping that money makes you feel a certain way. If you're chasing, a certain body weight, you're hoping that makes you feel a certain way. So the question of how are you feeling is a really good gauge of whether or not your intention is in the right place.
Yes.
And people don't think about that.
Well, it all goes back to the intention. And the intention to me is the why.
Yeah.
Is why. I totally forgot what the question you asked me was.
I forgot the question too.
But going back to sort of, if we have people that are still listening at this point into my rambling here, is I didn't appreciate the part of finding your own truth. Yeah, like that, I think it makes sense. And then the building the systems and habits, all that to help you get there. But the power of having the people that really, really matter, that support system. And Ash, like you and I, we don't talk every day, but when we do, it's real.
Yep.
And I appreciate that.
Have you started spending more time, like, do you curate your tribe now in terms of those people? Have you become more intentional about like who you surround yourself with, what your circle of trust is? I know I suffer with like feeling like, and I don't do this today, but I definitely used to do this, and we put our identity, our fake identity on, that we're supposed to be this, who we are supposed to be, and everyone expects us to be this certain way, and we're supposed to build this big community of people, and everyone's gonna like you and all that stuff. But really, it's like, as long as like 2 to 3 people in my life really love and care about me, I'm happy. How have you started thinking about that? And
look, if somebody likes me because I got a pair of Jordans and silver tabs, they're the wrong people.
yes.
And I don't know why it took me like 40 years to realize that. But yeah, I mean, life is still life, so you have to work with different types of people, but you do have to be very intentional and cognizant of the people, the things that you let influence, your thermometer or thermostat, whichever one you decide to be, right? So yeah. Right.
I love that. What's next for you? What's the next 5-10 years look like for you?
So I hit 40 last year. I'll be 41 this year.
Oh, baby. Big milestone.
And I think my 20s were really set up with getting ready so I could do it. And my 30s was like proving that I can do it because now I got all the things ready so I can do something, you know. And my 40s, I'd love to just be enjoying it, whatever it is. Right.
It's awesome. I don't have any more questions. You have any questions for me?
I actually do want to talk to you or ask you, the listeners here, you started this. What was your intent when you started, you know, back when? And then is it bringing, I mean, is it fulfilling that intent?
Well, it's absolutely fulfilling my intent. And I think that my whole intention about doing this was to share a part of life that I've been fortunate and grateful to experience with people. And even if 5 people are listening, I don't really care. I'm not looking to become Joe Rogan. I'm not, you know, and if it does, great, whatever. But really, I think that the conversations we're having in the boardrooms, in the conference rooms, in the roundtables, I felt like they were not happening outside of those places. And the rich equation for me is this whole redefinition of what it means to be rich. I think I was blind to that why for so long. And only until you become starting to reflect about why are we doing what we're doing? Who am I doing it for? What am I codependent to? You know, what are all these constructs in my life that I've created that I need to deconstruct? Had I started building this framework of, you know, what the 5 pillars are, and, you know, I started doing all the routines and surrounding myself with the right people, and I was starting to, you know, meditate and increase my awareness. I was starting to focus on the income that I wanted and not the income that I thought I was chasing. And so all these things, and it became this like really fulfilling journey for me. And so the podcast is just a way for me to share it. It's a way for me to continue to have conversations with amazing people, amazing humans that are doing really cool things and asking the whys in their own life, and then letting people listen and share and hopefully transcend that impact.
So if I were to ask you right now, right? So you're how old right now?
35.
35. Okay. So I can imagine from 25 to 35, you went through a certain transformation.
Yep.
Right. And so from 35 to 45, right? Who do you want to be at 45, looking back at 35-year-old you?
Such a great question. You know, somebody asked me this question, and they're like, if you had all the money and all the time in the world, what would you be doing? And my sincere answer was, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing. In 45, I think one of the core principles and core values I have is freedom. And being able to do all the things that I do and create value in the world while also maintaining freedom, I think is really important to me. And whether that means I'm making $100,000 or $1 million or $10 million or $100 million, whatever, as long as I can maintain that freedom to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, I hope to be able to do that for as long as I possibly can. Cool. I think that's my answer for now. Now that it's recorded, we'll check it again in 10 years. But I'm really enjoying it. Like I've been more intentional about choosing. Yeah. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Who am I doing it with? Yeah. And I think, like, for me as an entrepreneur who also needs to raise capital, like, I find that investors care about that. They care less about the product and more about the why. Yeah. About what are you trying to achieve? How are you trying to disrupt the world? What is the impact you're trying to make? And if we believe in that impact, I think you have a higher probability of success.
Since now I'm asking you questions, I'm just gonna keep asking you questions. All right, and you know, AJ, if she needs to cut it, just go ahead and cut it wherever she wants. But in this future version of you, or whatever, as you think about, things, tangible things,
Sure,
tangible things, right? Things
Yeah.
you buy. Right? Where do things sit in your spectrum of the future?
I think that there are,
Because the less things you own, the less you need to.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have a pretty. I mean, I like to spend money, but I also am not in. I like to spend money, but I also have a humble lifestyle. Yeah, I would drive a nice car. I live well. I do what I want when I want, but like, I don't spend out of my means. I don't spend exorbitantly. I encourage people to invest as much as they possibly can and keep investing, whether it's invest for their financial life or invest in themselves. I probably spend more than 20 to 25% of my income on me. Mindset stuff, body, right, what have you, coaches, trainers, blah, blah, blah. There's a few things on my list of materialistic things that I have a high priority. I think for me is a private plane. And I've never really shared this on the podcast. I'm glad we're talking about it. A private plane and a home on the water. And I'll explain why. At least those two things. I think cars can come and go. I think that they serve a purpose for people, whatever for whatever purpose they need. But for me, the home is a place where you can control energy. And the moment you leave the home, you can't necessarily control energy. You can control how you wake up, how you spend time with your kids and your wife, how you end up planning to go to bed. The energy in your home, you can control that. But the moment you leave, you interact with the world, you interact with people, you interact with commerce, you interact with the stock market, whatever. There's worldly things that happen to you. And I think that the way that your home environment is, the space it is, the smell it is, the sounds it is, I think is something that I need to create more of that. I want to create more space there, but that's one thing I really value. And the second thing is a private plane. And the reason why I value a private plane, not because I want to show it off and, go around flying with my friends on a $50 million plane.
In your Jordans.
It's in my Jordans. It's because I value time so much.
Yeah.
And I think a private plane is probably the most high leverage of time. If I want to travel, if I want to do what I want, be where I want, with whom I want, a private plane exemplifies that. That if you and I want to go to San Francisco for lunch, we can do it and we don't have to wait for anybody. And so that to me that's my dream.
35-year-old you picks up a phone, okay, and can call 25-year-old you right now. What would 35-year-old you say to 25-year-old you?
Play bigger. Stop playing small. Get rid of your codependencies. Work on yourself. And play bigger. Because you only got one life. Mic drop. Thanks so much, sincerely, brother, for joining me. I mean, we don't even have to talk about business. You're so sincere and honest, and I really appreciate being part of your journey, and I know you have so much to continue to give in the world, so I just am really honored for you to be here and share.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, man.
All right.